Good morning and welcome back to Reading Wikis for You, where we read the wiki articles for you. And today we're going to continue our look at the grim darkness of the far future by reading about the Primarch of the Ultramarines, Roboute Guilliman. Now, as always, I absolutely love getting your suggestions for videos that we should cover in the future. So while I'm reading, don't forget to drop a comment down below and let me know what you'd like to hear. But with that said, let's get started. Roboute Guilliman, also known as the Avenging Son, the Victorious, the Master of Ultramar, and the Blade of Unity, is one of the genetic sons of the Emperor of Mankind, the Primarch of the Ultramarines, his own genetic sons. An accomplished warlord and diplomat who ruled his own empire before rediscovery by the Emperor, Guilliman was unique among his brother Primarchs in that he saw himself as not only a warrior, but also a builder of civilizations. In addition to his leadership of the largest Space Marine Legion during the Great Crusade, Guilliman became renowned for his efforts to preserve the Imperium in the aftermath of the devastating Horus Heresy, becoming Lord Commander of the Imperium. Amongst his most noteworthy achievements is the authoring of the Codex Astartes and the creation of the modern imperial military structure. Shortly after the 13th Black Crusade, Roboute Guilliman was restored from his wounds and now once again leads the Imperium as its Lord Commander and Imperial Regent, the living voice of the Emperor. History. Youth. Like the other Primarchs, Roboute Guilliman was one of 20 genetically engineered sons of the Emperor of Mankind. Like his brothers, Roboute was taken as an infant by the powers of chaos and removed to a far-flung world in an effort to prevent the coming age of the Imperium. The infant Guilliman's capsule fell to Earth on Macragge, where it was discovered by a group of noblemen hunting in the forest. Inside the capsule they found a child, surrounded by a glowing aura. He was taken back to Conor, one of the two consuls who governed Macragge, who adopted the infant as his son and named him Roboute. Roboute's arrival on Macragge was a portentous time, and many reported strange sights. Most notably, Conor dreamed of the Emperor and found himself beside Hera's Falls in the Valley of Laponis. Upon awakening, Conor assembled his bodyguard and rode to Hera's Falls, where they found the child. The name Conor gave the child, Roboute, means Great One. Guilliman would also be raised by Conor's seneschal, Tarasha Uten, a strong-willed and capable woman. Roboute was a prodigy, growing fast in both body and intellect. By age 10, he had mastered every subject the wisest men of Macragge could teach him, and his insights into matters of history, philosophy, and science often stunned his elders. However, his greatest talents were as a military leader. These talents led his father to give him command of an expeditionary force to Illyrium, a mountainous region in the far north of Macragge, whose wild inhabitants had terrorized the civilized regions for years and successfully resisted every previous military campaign. Not only did Roboute fight a brilliant campaign, but he also earned the respect of the wildmen who never again threatened the more civilized parts of Macragge. While the history books state Guilliman militarily subdued the Illyrians, the reality was more complicated. Rather than engage in a protracted mountain guerrilla war, he simply occupied the Illyrians' sacred shrines. This caused the Illyrians to surge forth to meet his armies, but rather than crush them then and there, he challenged their chieftain to battle. During the duel, Guilliman only defended himself from his foe's blows, but never launched his own attacks. The chieftain eventually exhausted himself, but rather than slay his enemy, Guilliman instead presented him with the Illyrians' most sacred religious artifact, which centuries before the consuls of Macragge had stolen. Guilliman's act of diplomacy and humanity convinced the Illyrian chieftain to halt his campaign, seeking to become a just lord like Guilliman instead. It was at this moment that Tarasha Uten realized Guilliman had proven himself a true king. On his return to the capital, Roboute found the city in chaos, as his father's co-consul, Gallen, had attempted a coup. Gallen led a faction of Macragge's nobility who were used to enjoying their wealth and position at the expense of armies of slaves, and resented Conor's legislation favoring the common people, among whom he was immensely popular. Approaching the city, Roboute and his soldiers saw the city in chaos, being sacked by mobs of Gallen's men while the consul house was under siege. Roboute left his men to restore order to the city, while he rushed to the consul house and lifted the siege, only to find his father close to death, surrounded by his loyal bodyguards. He had been mortally wounded by an assassin in Gallen's employ, and with his dying breath told Roboute who was responsible. Roboute swiftly crushed the rebellion and, amid a wave of popular relief, assumed the title of sole consul of Macragge. He set about punishing the treachery and carrying about his father's vision. Galen and his co-conspirators were executed, and their lands and wealth were redistributed to the people. With superhuman energy, Roboute reorganized Macragge's entire social structure, creating a meritocracy where office and honors were given to the hard-working rather than the wealthy and influential. Under his leadership, Macragge prospered as it had never had before. The arrival of the Emperor. While Roboute was prosecuting his war against the Illyrian rebels, the Emperor of Mankind and his armies had reached the neighboring planet of Espandor. It was there that the Emperor heard stories of the extraordinary son of Consul Conor, and realized that he had found one of the lost Primarchs. However, due to an unexpected warp storm, his ship was thrown far off course, and by the time it reached Macragge, Roboute had been ruling for almost 5 years. When the Emperor reached Macragge, he found a world that was self-sufficient, prosperous, with a strong and well-equipped military, and engaging in trade with nearby star systems. Impressed, the Emperor assigned command of the Ultramarine Space Marine Legion to Guilliman, and relocated the Legion's forward base to Macragge. The Great Crusade. With the exception of the Luna Wolves, no Legion conquered as many worlds, or conquered worlds as fast, or left conquered worlds in such good state as during the Great Crusade as the Ultramarines. Whenever Guilliman liberated a world, he would not move on until he had set up a self-sufficient defense system, and left advisors behind to create industry, set up trade routes with the rest of the Imperium, and form a government whose first concern would always be the well-being of the people. At the same time, with the help of his new advisors, Guilliman created a supremely efficient military machine on Macragge and its surrounding worlds that provided the Ultramarines with a steady flow of new recruits. This factor, combined with the Primarch's tactical skill, also allowed his sons to perform with minimal casualties, leading it to become among the largest of the Space Marine legions. When Horus was appointed War Master by the Emperor, the reaction among the other Primarchs was mixed. Some supported the appointment out of affection for Horus, some opposed it, and some were cynically accepting. However, Guilliman, Rogel Dorn, and Jagatai Khan supported the appointment, believing in their cool, rational judgment that Horus was really the most worthy of them. For this reason, and because of their military genius, Horus valued Guilliman and Dorn as his closest advisors. Privately, Guilliman held 4 of his brothers in the greatest esteem: Dorn, Sanguinius, Leman Russ, and Ferrus Manus. He referred to them as the Dauntless Few, and pronounced that he could win any war outright if he had any one of those 4 and his legion at the Ultramarine side. Conversely, relations between Guilliman and Lorgar became miserable after the Emperor had the Ultramarines destroy Monarchia and be present during the shaming of the Word-Bearers. While Guilliman carried out these orders to the letter and appeared to be firmly supportive of the Emperor in front of Lorgar, in truth he was uncomfortable with his actions and upset that the Emperor used his legion as a tool for humiliation that drove a wedge between the Ultramarines and the Word-Bearers. The Horus Heresy. At the outbreak of the Horus Heresy, Guilliman and the Ultramarines were tricked by Horus, who sent them to the Viridian system, while Horus carried out his treasonous plot. When the treachery was revealed, the Ultramarines were poorly placed to react to it. While the Ultramarines mustered their forces at Calth in Ultramar, they were attacked by the Word-Bearers, and the Legion took heavy losses. However, the Word-Bearers had overlooked 2 major points: the unbreakable fighting spirit of the Ultramarines and the brilliance of Guilliman's command. An attempt by Lorgar to assassinate Guilliman with a demon who attacked the bridge of his flagship, forcing Guilliman to be sucked into space and fight several Word-Bearers without a helmet. Guilliman was eventually able to reboard his ship and promised to hunt down and kill Lorgar for the betrayal. At the climax of the battle, Guilliman ripped out one of the 2 hearts of Cor Pharon, the Word-Bearers' commander at Calth, after he had tried to tempt Guilliman to join the forces of Chaos. Meanwhile, Angron of the World Eaters and Lorgar of the Word-Bearers had launched the Shadow Crusade on isolated worlds in Ultramar. Their plan was to destroy as much of Ultramar as they could while the Ultramarines were occupied on Calth. After the victory at Calth, Guilliman, presumably under the guidance of his newly reinstated librarians, traveled to an isolated warp jump point on the outer fringes of Ultramar. There, he encountered Sanguinius of the Blood Angels, who had just recently finished his war with the Cygnus Cluster. The navigators of the Blood Angels had been ordered to find the closest stable warp zone, which many assumed would be Terra. Instead, fate brought them to Ultramar. With the addition of the Blood Angels to his forces, Guilliman pronounced they would finally begin countering the Shadow Crusade. After Calth, Guilliman pursued Lorgar, who had since allied with Angron, to the world of Nuceria. There, the Ultramarines engaged both the World Eaters and Word-Bearers, while Guilliman himself battled Lorgar, finding the once weaker Word-Bearer's Primarch to be surprisingly capable in combat. The situation for Guilliman got worse when Angron arrived, battering Guilliman with a furious assault and eventually defeating the Lord of Macragge. However, as Angron was about to land the final blow, Ultramarines were able to arrive and safely retrieve their Primarch. As a result of being cut off by the ruin storm created by the traitorous word-bearers, Guilliman feared that the Imperium lost and created a second empire, Imperium Secundus, as a contingency. Many loyalist brothers were brought to Macragge thanks to the activation of the Xenos device known as the Pharos. Not wanting to appear vain and power-hungry like his brother Horus, Guilliman refused to declare himself Emperor of Imperium Secundus, instead initially trying to convince Lionel Johnson to take the position despite being distrustful of the Dark Angel's Primarch's motives. While organizing the creation of Imperium Secundus, Guilliman survived an assassination attempt by an Alpha Legion squad disguised as Aeonid Thiel and other Ultramarines. Later, when Conrad Kurz was let loose upon Macragge, Guilliman and the Lion battled the Night Lords, Primarch together, but were led into a trap. Instead of being cornered, Kurz detonated charges and brought the entire structure down upon their heads. Guilliman and the Lion survived thanks to Barabbas d'Antioch activating the Pharos, which teleported the duo to Sotha. The Lion and Guilliman then made their way back to Macragge, where the Blood Angels had now arrived. Guilliman decided to name the reluctant Sanguinius the regent of Imperium Secundus. However, Guilliman frequently clashed with his distrustful and taciturn brother Lionel Johnson over policy. Obsessed with hunting for Conrad Kurz on Macragge, the Lion insisted that the Night Haunter was behind rebellions plaguing the world and demanded martial law be instituted. After a suicide bombing hit an Astartes convoy on Macragge, the Dark Angels were deployed by the Lion to establish martial law without Guilliman's express permission. Guilliman and the Lion again came to disagreement over the rebellion in the Illyrium region of Macragge, with the Dark Angel's Primarch wishing to use weapons of mass destruction to flush them out as he suspected Kurz was hiding there. Ultimately, the Lion led the attack into Illyrium and Kurz was captured. At Guilliman's insistence, he was given a public trial. During the trial, Kurz accused the Lion of ordering secret orbital attacks against the rebellion, which enraged the Dark Angel's Primarch and nearly led him to slaying Kurz in the court. Guilliman and Sanguinius dismissed the Lion from Imperium Secundus as response, but later the Lion reappeared and asked to be Kurz's jailer instead. Following the trial of Kurz, Sanguinius, Lionel Johnson, and Guilliman all agreed to try and breach the Ruin Storm to reach Terra and aid the Emperor, who they now knew still lived. In the Ruin Storm, the Loyalist fleet came across a variety of horrors and word of an entity spreading destruction known as the Pilgrim. During the voyage through the Ruin Storm, Guilliman's fleet was ambushed by traitor forces at Anuari, where the Avenging Son survived an assassination attempt by word-bearers armed with athames. Believing he could study the weapons for understanding of the enemy and potentially using it against them, Guilliman kept the blades in his vault. During the Battle of Piran, Guilliman commanded the Ultramarines personnel as Sanguinius received a vision, and he realized that he needed to go where the struggle had begun, Davin. Reluctantly, Guilliman and the Lion agreed to trust in Sanguinius, but both had thought they would simply destroy the world upon arriving. While over Davin, Sanguinius shocked the Lion by boarding the Invincible Reason and taking the captive Conrad Kurz with him. Sanguinius hoped to use Kurz's prophetic abilities to determine what he was meant to do upon Davin. Sanguinius then commended a mass landing on the world, and the enraged Lion nearly ordered that Davin be subjected to exterminatus regardless of Sanguinius's presence on it. After the horrified Lion expressed to Guilliman that he believed something was trying to manipulate them to the path of damnation, the Ultramarine Primarch knew what he must do and crushed his captive athame blades with his power fist. He declared he would not be tempted in the same way that Horus had. At Davin, Sanguinius was trapped within a portal and did battle with the demon Madail, while Guilliman and the Lion desperately tried to reach him. A vicious battle erupted both on Davin and above it, in which Guilliman's acting flagship, Samothrace, was destroyed in orbit by the daemon ship Veritas Ferrum. During the battle at Davin's temple, Guilliman and the Lion managed to finally fight his brothers, and together they brought down a massive soul grinder. Eventually, Sanguinius was able to escape and the Space Marine forces evacuated to space. Davin was destroyed by cyclonic torpedoes, and with its anchor gone, the demonic fleet vanished. In the place of where Davin once was, a breach in the Ruin Storm was visible. The path led to Terra, but upon further study it became apparent that somehow Horus had foreseen this route and a large blockade was erected to block them. Guilliman and the Lion agreed to distract the blockade while Sanguinius and the Blood Angels made directly for Terra, for that was their destiny. After the death of the Ruin Storm, Guilliman gathered whatever forces he could and made haste for Terra. In his path lay a large defensive chain of hundreds of worlds manned by the Iron Warriors. In a series of bitter engagements, both sides took heavy losses, but the Ultramarines were able to maintain a steady advance. Ultimately, Guilliman was able to set course for Holy Terra. Traveling at maximum speed, his reinforcement fleet of over 3,200 capital ships was scant hours away as the Emperor battled Horus aboard the Vengeful Spirit. However, without the Astronomicon to light the way, Guilliman's force was marooned just out of Terra's reach, as at conventional speed it would take tens of thousands of years for them to eventually find the throne world. This situation reversed when, thanks to the effort of Euphrates Keeler and her faithful, the Astronomicon was reactivated, and Guilliman arrived at Terra to drive back the traitors in the wake of Horus's defeat. Post-heresy. In the aftermath of the Great Betrayal, the Emperor had been incapacitated, and the Space Marines' numbers had been decimated by defections to chaos and battle losses. The Ultramarines were left as the largest loyal legion, and Guilliman assumed the title of Lord Commander of the Imperium. For years thereafter, Guilliman deployed and led the Ultramarines throughout the galaxy, reclaiming worlds lost to chaos and preventing the loss of still others to rebellion or invasion from outside the Imperium. At the same time, Guilliman reorganized the Space Marine legions as chapters and composed the Codex Astartes, the tome that the Ultramarines and many other chapters follow strictly. Guilliman led the assault against the Alpha Legion on Escrador in the aftermath of the heresy, and due to the vanity of Alfarius, he utilized a surprise attack at the heart of the traitors and killed Alfarius in a duel. However, he and his sons were greatly mistaken in their belief that the snake would die without the head, as indeed the Alpha Legion symbol is a hydra, a multi-headed serpent. The Ultramarines were soundly pushed back time and again by the traitor Marines, undaunted at the loss of their Primarch. Guilliman eventually pulled his forces back into orbit and bombarded the planet from above. Sometime before the Battle of Thessala, Guilliman tasked the tech priest Belisarius Cawl with two deeds: the resurrection of Guilliman should he fall, and the creation of the next generation of Space Marines. Later, in the Battle of Thessala against the Emperor's children, Guilliman would be grievously wounded, where Alfarius had not greatly embraced the Chaos powers and was essentially unchanged from his original Primarch form. Fulgrim had been to the Eye of Terror, reaping the terrible powers therein, and had been enslaved by Slaanesh to a mighty and fell demon prince, no longer resembling a man, but his original purity of form corrupted and augmented by the ruinous powers. Fulgrim was now a serpentine creature of immense stature and multi-limbed. Each limb carried a poisoned sword, and in the clash he stabbed Guilliman in the neck. Guilliman was interred in the stasis field by the apothecaries and remains frozen in the instant of death, while Fulgrim escaped back to the Eye of Terror. For the next 10,000 years, Guilliman's mortal body remained in stasis on the Shrine of Guilliman deep within the Temple of Correction, one of the holiest places in the entire Imperium. Some pilgrims claimed that the Primarch's wounds were slowly recovering, a feat credited to the power of the Emperor. Others deny the phenomenon and point out the sheer impossibility of change within the stasis field. Yet enough believe the stories to come and witness them for themselves the miracle of the Primarch. Return. Awakening. Shortly after Abaddon the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade and the destruction of Cadia, the tech priest Belisarius Cawl and Saint Celestine led a group of Imperial survivors into the Webway with the aid of their new Eldar allies. The group arrived at Macragge, where Cawl revealed that he had in fact lived for the last 10,000 years and was ordered by Guilliman himself to complete two tasks in the event of his downfall. One of these was to revive Guilliman, a feat that Cawl could now accomplish thanks to Eldar aid, using a suit of power armor that regenerated the wounds inflicted by Fulgrim. Guilliman was restored just as Black Legion forces invaded Macragge. Reborn, Guilliman swiftly drove off the Chaos Invaders before taking in the truths of the Imperium after his 10,000-year absence. Guilliman displayed several miracles after his rebirth. His mere presence was able to cure any afflicted with a Nurgle-created blindness-inducing illness. Disgusted by the decay, superstition, and ignorance that surrounds the modern Imperium, Guilliman convened a war council of his Ultramarines as to what to do next. After several days, he declared his intent to travel to Terra and to see his father upon the Golden Throne. However, Guilliman's revival had attracted the gaze of the gods of chaos and demon primarchs, throwing the warp into an uproar. The journey to Terra, known as the Terran Crusade, became an arduous affair that saw his fleet trapped in the Maelstrom after an ambush by Magnus and his 1,000 sons. Inside the Maelstrom, the Imperial expedition was defeated by Kairos Fateweaver and the Red Corsairs, with the Primarch himself trapped in crystal chains made from his own doubts. Held by Kairos inside a blackstone fortress, the Imperial expedition seemed doomed. However, thanks to the efforts of the Harlequin Silandri Veilwalker and the fallen angel Cypher, Guilliman and the rest of the surviving expedition were freed and escaped towards a webway portal. Guilliman held the portal long enough for his men to escape, defeating the bloodthirster Skarbrand after witnessing the sacrifice of Marshal Amalric. The Imperial expedition eventually arrived through another portal on Luna, but this time were followed by Magnus and his 1,000 sons. On the surface of Luna, Magnus and Guilliman dueled as the battle raged around them. Guilliman was overcome by Magnus's psychic abilities upon the arrival of reinforcements from Terra that included Sisters of Silence. With Magnus's psychic abilities weakened, Guilliman was able to impale his demonic brother and force him back into the webway as the gate was sealed. Regent. Afterwards, Guilliman landed on Terra and gained access to the Emperor's throne room inside the Imperial Palace. Guilliman stood before the Golden Throne alongside Captain General Trajan Valoris, and the Emperor awoke for the first time in millennia. In a surreal experience which Guilliman cannot now fully remember, the now nearly inhuman Emperor told him that he was the last hope to save mankind and brutally assaulted his mind with dark truths of the galaxy and its history. What exactly transpired is unclear. According to Valoris, Guilliman spoke in silent psychic conversation with the Emperor for several minutes, while Guilliman remembers falling to the ground in agony. Moreover, only minutes seemed to pass for the two, but when they emerged, it had been over a day. Regardless of the truth, Guilliman emerged with a new determination. He gathered the High Lords of Terra and declared that the Imperium would be reorganized and rearmed under his leadership in order to confront the coming threat of chaos. With that, Guilliman declared himself Lord Commander of the Imperium once more. He later declared himself Imperial Regent, the living hand of the Emperor. One of his first major acts as Lord Commander was to defend Terra itself against the forces of Khorne in the Second Battle of Terra. Guilliman subsequently declared the Indomitus Crusade to reclaim the devastated worlds isolated from Terra by the Great Rift. The campaign was waged for the next several years as Guilliman and the Supreme Commander-in-Chief Administrator of the Imperium. He simultaneously oversaw vast campaigns spearheaded by Belisarius Caul's new Primaris Space Marines and sweeping civic reforms which culminated in the Codex Imperialis. Guilliman soon learned of the Necron Pariah Nexus and learned from Caul of the threat it represented to humanity. He and Caul planned for a major expedition to the Nephilim sector on a mission to disrupt the network. During the Battle of Mesmok, a massive battle fleet of Necron warships under Triarch and Zarek's proxy Hapthatra the Radiant swept from the void to oppose Guilliman's attack. Speaking through Hapthatra, Zarek demanded the Imperial surrender and proclaimed the galaxy as the Necron's domain. Guilliman, unsurprisingly, refused the Necron demands and ordered a fighting withdrawal aimed at keeping the Xenos occupied while Caul completed their true objective at Planet 7/2. It soon became apparent that the Necrons intended to capture, not destroy, the Imperials in hopes of perhaps gaining Guilliman. Ordering the evacuation of his flagship, Dawn of Fire, Guilliman stayed on board with the force of Custodes under Colquhoun to draw the Necrons' attention. The Dawn of Fire was quickly disabled by the Necrons, who boarded the vessel with troops as Guilliman and his entourage finally began to attempt to withdraw. Cato Sicarius, commander of the Victrix Guard, is able to destroy a Necron lord to clear a path for Guilliman to flee as the gateway opens, revealing the Silent King Zarek personally. Guilliman drew the Emperor's sword and prepared for a fight, but was foiled by Iliane Natase, who closed the portal and allowed the group to escape as the Dawn of Fire was destroyed. In the aftermath of the battle, with Caul having largely achieved his mission to locally disrupt the Pariah Nexus, Guilliman left the Nephilim war zone and appointed White Consul's Captain Vitrian Messinius as its warden. As the Indomitus Crusade wound down, he rushed back to Ultramar to protect his sons from the onslaught of Nurgle. During the Plague Wars, Guilliman survived an assassination attempt by Mortarion, Typhus, and Kugath on Parmenio. Guilliman was nearly cornered in the trap, but was saved by the efforts of a mysterious young girl that seemed to be a powerful living saint. The Plague Wars came to their dramatic conclusion on Yax. Guilliman learned of the plot being enacted there by Mortarion and Kugath through interviewing a captured Daemon host, much to the objection of his tetrarch Decimus Felix, his Eldar liaison Iliane Natase, and the Grey Knights. Despite knowing he was walking into a trap, Guilliman decided to nonetheless confront Mortarion on Yax. On the Blighted World, the two came to blows. Guilliman was able to hold his own for a time, but was eventually defeated by the Demon Primarch's warp-enhanced might and resilience. With Guilliman disabled, Mortarion administered the deadly phage known as the God's Blight, which was capable of even killing a Primarch. Guilliman remained defiant as he succumbed to the disease, refusing Mortarion's goading to give in to Nurgle in order to have the pain end. Seemingly dead for a time, as his spirit hung in balance, Guilliman experienced a surreal vision of his reunion with the Emperor upon his return. The vision makes it clear that not even Guilliman truly knows what transpired in the throne room that day, save that the Emperor awoke for the first time in millennia. In reality, the Emperor's psychic might flowed through Guilliman, and the Primarch was able to spring back to life, causing a shocked Mortarion to flee before the power of his father. Channeling the Emperor directly, Guilliman raised his father's sword and unleashed a psychic attack that burned the Garden of Nurgle itself. The mighty blow was enough to damage a portion of the garden and wound Nurgle personally. With that, the Primarch fell into unconsciousness. Guilliman reappeared on Yax, where he explained the victory to Colquhoun. He later met with the recovered militant apostolic Matteo to thank him for his part in the victory on Yax, and the priest informed the Primarch that the Emperor was preparing to return. Matteo died shortly after, with Guilliman assuring the dead priest that Matheo's tale of heroism would be told to his successor, and, should the new militant apostolic choose to do so, would not dissuade them from making Matteo a saint. Now, questioning his former atheism, Guilliman began to probe Call Inferior for the meaning of the Emperor's return and godhood. After the victory on Yax, he also expressed his intent to leave the Imperium Sanctus and journey into Imperium Nihilus to shore up his defenses. The Crusade fleet then planned to venture into Imperium Nihilus through the Nachmund Gauntlet. Much like the Indomitus Crusade's Torchbearer fleets, the Imperial Regent planned to bolster any Space Marine chapters found with Primaris reinforcements and the means for the chapter to begin producing Primaris themselves. To aid in this, Guilliman sent a missive to Archmagos Call via the Call Inferior, requesting an expert to accompany the fleet. Guilliman knew Call himself would decline due to being preoccupied with reactivating the Necron Pylon network, and suggested that trusted biologist or expert in all things Primaris. The Archmagos would send QVO-88 in his stead. Guilliman eventually succeeded in making it to Imperium Nihilus. He arrived at Baal as it was beset by both Tyranids and Chaos, and helped save the Blood Angels and their successor chapters from destruction. After the battle, Guilliman met with Dante, whom he appointed as regent of Imperium Nihilus, and gave the resources to bring some semblance of order to the besieged realm. He then returned to Imperium Sanctus to continue his work. Description: An extract from Ultima Operational Record 1136.271.v, the official chronicle of the Battle of Calth, describes the Ultramarines Primarch thus. He is handsome, in a plain way. He is handsome the way a regent on an old coin is handsome, like a good sword is handsome. He is not handsome like a ritual weapon, the way Fulgrim is. He is not angelic like Sanguinius. There is a dutiful line to his jaw, like his good brother Dorn. They share a nobility. There is the great strength of Ferris and the vitality of Mortarion. There is sometimes the rogue glint of the Khan in his eyes, or the solemnity of the lion. In the architecture of his nose and brow there is, many claim, the energy and triumph of Horus Lupercal. There is none of the bitterness that shadows Corax, or the persecuted despair that haunts poor Conrad. There is never any of the deliberate mystery that obscures Alpharius or Magnus, and he is more open than that buried soul, Vulcan. He never displays the pitch or fury found in Agron, nor do his eyes ever ignite with the psychotic gleam of Russ. He is a high achiever. He knows this about himself. Sometimes it feels like a fault that he has to excuse his brothers, but then he feels guilty for making excuses. He writes a great deal. He codifies everything. Information is power. Technical theory is victory. He uses a stylus by choice, recording in his own handwriting. He has been writing notes on Tevanti war practices for 17 minutes, but he has still noted and marked 1,500 data bulletins and updates that have tracked across the secondary screens to his left. He sees and reconciles everything. Information is victory. War gear. It is known that at the height of his power during the Horus Heresy, Guilliman was armed with the Hand of Dominion, a mighty power gauntlet, that with Guilliman's strength could fell a titan. The Gladius Incandor, a blade of exceptional craftsmanship and symbol of his legion, and also with an arbitrator, a customized combi bolter. For protection, Guilliman wore a suit of power armor known as the Armor of Reason. Upon his resurrection at the end of the 41st millennium, Guilliman continued to use the Hand of Dominion, but took up the Emperor's sword as his primary weapon. In addition, he now wears the Armor of Fate, the very device that allowed him to heal the injuries sustained by Fulgrim 10,000 years earlier. Quotes. In any battle, great or small, the most insignificant of terrain and the most worthless of ground can, for minutes or perhaps hours, become so valuable that the blood of heroes and the wealth of an army supply does not outweigh it. The true general knows when such a price is worth spending and when the butcher's bill is sheer folly to pay. From the book On War. The Horus Heresy, Book 5, Tempest. Are we not Space Marines? Is this not the very task we were created for? Prior to the teleportation assault on the Zeston Verid Yard. Horus Heresy, Book 5, Tempest. To conduct battle on two fronts is an act of either desperation or utter foolishness. In such an arena, it is neither skill nor firepower that brings victory, but the ability to manipulate that of your enemy. Codicil 1923, The Writings of Roboute Guilliman. The Horus Heresy, Book 6, Retribution. To admit defeat is to blaspheme against the Emperor. Unknown. The warrior who acts out of honor cannot fail. His duty is honor itself. Even if his death, if it is honorable, is a reward and can be no failure, for it has come through duty. Seek honor as you act, therefore, and know you will no fear. Unknown. Whatever the Emperor's will is, be sure you find it out. Attributed. Nightbringer by Graham McNeil. Let them bestride the galaxy like the gods of old, sheltering mankind from destruction at the hands of an uncaring universe. From the teachings of Guilliman as laid down in the Apocrypha of Scaros on the Space Marines. Codex Space Marines 5th edition. It is the great irony of the legions of Astartes, engineered to kill to achieve a victory of peace that they can be no part of. Shortly before the Battle of Calth. Know No Fear by Dan Abnett. Space Marines excel at warfare because they were designed to excel at everything. Each of you will become a leader, a ruler, the master of your world, and, because there is no more fighting to be done, you will bend your transhuman talents to governance and culture. Shortly before the Battle of Calth. Know No Fear by Dan Abnett. Never wish for danger. Danger needs no help. There is no such thing as fate that can be tempted, but morale is never improved by an active lust for war. Remark 56.xxi. Know No Fear by Dan Abnett. Two things to note here, Sergeant. One is that there is no such thing as a minor detail. Information is victory. One cannot and should not dismiss any data until one is in a position to evaluate its significance, and that only comes with hindsight. So all detail is important until circumstances render it redundant. Know No Fear by Dan Abnett. My brother, hear me. Warriors of the 17th Legion, hear me. This violence is against the code of the Legions of Astartes, and against the will of our father, the Emperor. In the name of the 500 worlds of Ultramar, I implore you to cease fire and stand down. Open communication with me. Let us speak. Let us settle this. This action is an error of the most tragic kind. Cease fire. I, Roboute Guilliman, give you my solemn pledge that we will deal with each other frankly and fairly if these hostilities can be suspended. I urge you to respond. Vox transmission. Battle of Calth. Mark 0.00.01. Know No Fear by Dan Abnett. Lorgar of Colchis. You may consider the following. 1. I entirely withdraw my previous offer of solemn ceasefire. It is cancelled and will not be made again, to you or to any other of your motherless bastards. 2. You are no longer any brother of mine. I will find you. I will kill you. I will hurl your toxic corpse into hell's mouth. Vox transmission, Battle of Calth. Mark 1.57.42. Know No Fear by Dan Abnett. What does not kill me is not trying hard enough. Know No Fear by Dan Abnett. They shall be pure of heart and strong of body, untainted by doubt and unsullied by self-aggrandizement. They will be bright stars on the firmament of battle, angels of death whose shining wings bring swift annihilation to the enemies of man. So it shall be for 1,000 times for 1,000 years until the very end of eternity and the extinction of mortal flesh. Codex Astartes, opening. Codex Space Marine, 6th edition. I am the fist, clenched tight and ceramite, smashing with the force of a legion. I am the blade awaiting my foe's flesh, as keen as the Emperor could make me. I am the bolt fired from afar, fleet and true, an end to all who stand before the Imperium of Man. Reference to raise the combat confusion with clarity, to banish doubt, and reinforce a legionary's purpose. The Honored novella. For the Emperor stands behind his sons and the Primarchs behind their captains. It is a captain's duty to place legionary lives in harm's way before his own. There is too little glory in the galaxy to go around, and officers must be generous in the trust they place in others. For one day, such brothers must be captains too. About the promotion of the newly assigned Space Marines, the Honored. Man never changes, so war never changes. Attributed. Echoes of the Long War by David Geimer. I will not be derelict in my duty to the Legion and to my father. I can't ensure my eternal existence. I will do everything in my power to ensure the Legions. The Ultramarines will be forever. You are my sons. You are my essence. So is the Legion and what animates it. About duty to lead Ultramarines. Roboute Guilliman, Lord of Ultramar. Trivia. The origin of Guilliman's name is unclear. It was thought it was based on Robert Charles Guilliman, a Boston-based street artist of the 1980s famous for using acrylic paints. However, Rick Priestley said it was a name he made up that sounded like a West Indian revolutionary in a French colony, possibly Haiti. Belisarius Call remembers Guilliman as having a kindly face with sad brown eyes, always being worried, no joy in his life of duty. See also the Guilliman Inferior and the Armor of Fate short story. All right, there is the Primarch of the Ultramarines, Roboute Guilliman. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please do give a like. And as always, drop a comment down below. Let me know what article you'd like to see next. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.